What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to talk about the top 10 most surprising sales I saw last week. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. Before we get into this video, I just want to say congratulations to Kyle Hollywood. Your comment up here is the one that won the giveaway for my video on the Aquaman keys earlier, so that Superman 233 is on its way to you now. So congratulations with that. Now back to this video. If you haven't watched one of these before, what I do is I watch the weekly Heritage comic auction. I evaluate usually around 200 books per week across all ages, and I look at their the prices that I think they're going to sell for, their previous highs, and I pick out 5 books that surprised me on the high end that beat my estimates, and 5 books that surprised me on the low end that failed to meet those estimates. So this gives you an idea maybe of just some books that are having big sales, popular books right now, as well as some books that maybe people picked up as on a deal, or maybe that book's starting on a downtrend. But also as part of this, I give some recommendations for alternatives, because a lot of times these books are pretty expensive, can be big keys, and so it's good to know some alternative books that you could pick up as well. Alright, so with that, let's get started with number 10. This was a low sale. This was Avengers number 4 with a CGC 5.0 that sold for just $2,400. Now, this is the first Silver Age appearance of Captain America. It is a classic cover, and it's another book similar to some of the Iron Man keys that has been surprisingly strong since that character is effectively now out of the MCU. But in general, it has continued to trend up. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $3,000. This was 20% below that estimate, and there have been other sales this year already of $2,950 and $3,299 in this grade. So I do think that this person probably just got a great deal on this book, and it's never a bad book to pick up if you can especially get it under those recent sales or those high sales, because it's a big key. It's always going to be in demand from collectors, being that first Silver Age appearance, given with how expensive his first appearance in the Golden Age actually is. Now, this book had peaked all the way back on April 19th of 2021 with a sale of $3,400. Like I said, there was a $3,300 sale this year already, so a lot of those sales are getting close to those prior highs. This one, $2,400, was 29% below that peak sale. I do think this person probably just got a great deal on this book at $2,400. Now, it is an expensive book. It's tough to get this book anywhere below $1,000 at this point, so there are a bunch of good alternatives for this one. My favorite personally is probably Captain America number 100. This has a very similar style of cover. You've got him right on the cover with a lot of the members of the Avengers team, and it's basically Captain America number 1 for the Silver Age, similar to Iron Man 1, Submariner 1, those kinds of books. Now, in that same 5.0 grade, you can spend around $400 to $500. That's the range this book has been selling in this year. So 5-6 times less than what you're paying for that Avengers number 4 with that first Silver Age appearance. So definitely a much more affordable option for a similar cover, and also a minor key. I'll call it a minor key for that character. Now, his second Silver Age appearance is Fantastic Four number 25. Now, that is a great Hulk Thing cover, but he's not really featured on the cover of that book. So while yes, it is a good book as well because it's got that Hulk Thing battle, it doesn't really feature Cap, so I do like Captain America 100 a lot more as an alternative for this book. Alright, now number 9, and this was a high sale. This was Fantastic Four number 1, so one of the big marquee Silver Age keys. This was a CGC 4.5 that sold for $36,000. Now, this was a big record for this grade. This book has been on a tear in the latter half of 2021 and now going into 2022. This is the book that really started that superhero revolution for Marvel in the Silver Age, and it is quickly becoming out of reach for a lot of collectors. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $28,000. This was 29% above that estimate, $8,000 above that estimate. Prior record from September 2nd was $29,500, so it beat that sale by 22%, but there was also a $28,000 sale on December 16th, so this is a big jump from just about a month ago. Now, for this one, it is tough to get an alternative for this book, especially something that's affordable. I mean, personally, I think probably the best affordable option is Fantastic Four #3. Now, this is the first time that you see these characters in their costumes. It's a really cool cover. It is a tough book to get in higher grade, even in mid-grade. It is a very low census count compared to the other books around it. Now, this is not a cheap book by any stretch. That same 4.5 is probably going to cost you around $2,500 or $2,600. So yeah, that's much less than that $36,000 price point, but it's still a very significant amount of money. So early Fantastic Four in the top 5-6 issues are they're extremely expensive. You're going to spend a lot of money in just about any grade, but a good alternative, in my opinion, for issue #1 is definitely issue #3. All right, now #8, this is a low sale. This is X-Men #4 with a CGC 4.5 that sold for just $2,160. Now, this is the first appearance of a bunch of characters. I have definitely talked about this book before. The big ones are Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, but it's also the second appearance of Magneto. So you've got, that really big second appearance in this book as well. I think it is an awesome cover. It is one of my favorite Silver Age covers. I really do like this book. Now, this sale was interesting to me for a couple of reasons. The first is that a lot of books tied to the upcoming Doctor Strange movie have been on a tear recently. This one, not really. And so this one has that first appearance of Scarlet Witch. It seems like she's almost guaranteed to be in that Doctor Strange movie. And so you would think that this is a book that would be moving up as well. So that's a little surprising to see some weakening in this book. But the other thing that was surprising is that in this same auction, literally like 20 seconds later, a 4.0 sold. This was a lower grade copy. It was white pages, but a 4.0 sold for $1,200 more. It sold for $3,360. So I don't know if it was the white pages premium, because like I said, sometimes you get a premium for that, sometimes you don't, or if it was some people had regretted not bidding on that 4.5 and they really wanted one of these books, and so it ended up bidding up this lower grade copy. So I thought that was a really interesting sale with this, because you had the 4.5 selling for $2,160 and the 4.0 selling for $3,360. So a really big difference in the price of those books. Now, I had estimated the price of the 4.5 at $2,750. This was 21% below that estimate. Prior record was actually $4,000 from back in May of 2021. So back when we had basically everything hitting those peak prices. So it's down 46% from that high. Now, this is definitely a book that I think is very worthwhile to be looking into right now. In most cases, it is down quite a bit from where it had peaked in 2021. It's a big Silver Age key. You've got that second appearance of Magneto, first appearance of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Toad, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, it is an awesome cover. So I think this one being down is definitely a book that's worthwhile to look into, to try to pick up. But I was very surprised about that 4.0 sale versus that 4.5 sale. Now, for alternatives for this one, there is a book that is quite a bit more affordable. You could go one issue later in X-Men #5. It's the second appearance of Scarlet Witch, second appearance of Quicksilver, third appearance of Magneto, but I do not like this cover. I think Magneto looks pretty terrible on this cover. I'm not a huge fan of this book, and I think that's part of why it sells for so much less than X-Men #4. That same 4.5 is selling for about $500 right now. So that's about 4 to 5 times less than issue #4. And so, yes, that is an alternative if you want to have something where you're investing in those characters, but it's not my favorite book. I'm not a huge fan of that cover. So if you can get a copy of that issue #4, that is what I would be going for. All right, now NumberSeven. This is a high sale. I always have Amazing Spider-Man on these lists. A lot of these books sell in these auctions, and they always have interesting sales, and he is the king of the Silver Age. He's one of the most popular characters, if not the most popular character out there, so just like talking about him. Now, this was Amazing Spider-Man number 101 with a CGC 9.0 that sold for a record $3,840. And despite people crapping all over the Morbius movie that's coming out, a lot of people do not seem to have high expectations for that movie. I think it looks like it's going to be interesting. We'll see how it turns out. But despite that, this book has been on a pretty big tear. It has definitely been on an uptrend. Now, this is the first appearance of Morbius. This 9.0 sale was a big record. I had estimated the price of this book at $2,850. This was 35% above that estimate, almost $1,000, $990 above that estimate. Prior record from December 22nd was $3,000, so it beat out that prior record by 28% in just over a month. So this is one, though, that I personally wouldn't be going after right now. I think there's a lot of the FOMO going on with this one and people bidding this book up, and ultimately when that movie comes out, if it's a disappointment in any way, you will see prices on this book drop. So personally, not a book I'd be going after right now. But if you want an alternative, because this book is getting expensive, it is more affordable in lower grades, but still pretty expensive, you could go for the second print. That second print actually came out 21 years later in 1992. And so it is much more affordable, has more of a, it's like a silver type background. And you can get this book in a 9.8 in the $250 to $350 range. And in the 9s, it's anywhere from $100 to $200. So much more affordable. And you likely would also see this book trend up if you saw some additional moves with Amazing Spider-Man 101, the first print. So it's a less risky option for, putting a lot of money into that character, especially since I do think that these are probably near a high point right now. All right, now number 6. This was a low sale. This is Savage Tales number 1 with a CGC 7.0 that sold for just $810. Now, there are actually a couple books on this list that I picked up. I bought a number of books in this auction. You will see them in a future unboxing. This is the first appearance of Man-Thing, and this is a character that has been another one that's just been on a huge tear recently. Just a big run up in the prices on this book. This is a magazine-sized book, and I was happy to pick up a copy of this one at what I felt was below its current prices. It's the prices it's going for right now. So I had estimated the price of this book at $1,050. This was 23% below that estimate. Prior record was $1,000 all the way back in February of 2021. And with all the hype and the other sales that I've seen in other grades around this one recently, this just felt like a really good price to me. There had been a 7.5 that sold for $1,100, a 6.5 that sold for $1,500, and a 6.0 that sold for $960. So definitely feel like this was a good price given those other sales around this book. Now, there are a lot of alternatives for this character. You have his first solo story, you have his first solo series. The one that I'd recommend that I think is a pretty cool cover is his first solo story. That's in Fear number 10. And I've definitely talked about this book before as well. I've shown Fear number 19 in a recent unboxing. That's the first appearance of Howard the Duck, and it's also a Man-Thing cover. But that Fear number 10, the first solo story, for that same about $800, you can get a 9.6 copy of this book. You can get a very high grade copy of this book. Or if you go down into the same grade range, around a 7.0, this is a book that's going to cost you about $150. So not a very risky investment for a character that it seems like has a pretty good chance of appearing in the MCU eventually. All right, now number 5, this is a high sale, and we're going back to the Avengers title. This is Avengers number 1 with a CGC 1.0 that sold for a huge record, $3,120. Now, I actually went back and double checked to make sure that I hadn't copied this number in wrong, because I was pretty surprised at this sale price. Over $3,000 for a 1.0. Now, this was a massive sale for this book. This is the first appearance of the Avengers as a team. It's also a really cool cover. You've got Loki on the cover fighting against all that original Avengers team. Now, the weird thing with this book is I have noticed some definite price compression with this book. And what I mean by that is, you have not a lot of price difference between a wide range of grades. And so like with this, you have a 1.0 selling for $3,120, and then you have a 4.5 in this same auction that went for $5,520. That's just $2,400 difference across 3.5 grades. A 4.5 looks a lot different than a 1.0. It is a much better presenting copy. And so I don't know what we're going to have happen, if we're going to have the prices increase in those kind of more mid grades, if they're eventually going to shift up, or if we're going to have, if this was a kind of a fluke sale and we're going to have prices drop down some in these lower grades. But this has been a very surprising book to me because we've seen the lower grades really ramp up in price. The really low grades, it has a very high baseline value. Basically the minimum that someone is going to sell this book for, but the prices aren't increasing as fast as you would expect them to when you get up into those 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s type grade points. So just something interesting that I've noticed with this book. Now, I had estimated the price of this book, this 1.0, at $2,000. This was 56% above that estimate. The prior record in May, so back in May, when everything was peaking again, was $2,520. So this is another example of one of these books beating out those prior records from May of last year when everything was spiking. So beat that by 24%. Just a huge sale, especially considering there had been quite a few sales in this grade at a 1.0 in the $1,800 to $2,000 range since then, including a $1,900 sale this year. So this was definitely a big sale for this book. Now, for alternatives, it's a little tough with this one. You can go with Avengers #2. It's definitely not as great of a cover. It's this yellow cover. Personally, I don't like it nearly as much as the cover for Avengers #1, and it does sell for significantly less. It's tough to even price a 1.0. People don't grade 1.0s of that book really, so they don't come up for sale very often. But you could get something in the 4 to 4.5 range for around $550 to $650, about 8 to 10 times less than that issue #1. So that follows that general trend that I've talked about a number of times in the past, that usually a rule of thumb between the first and second appearance is around 10x, that second appearance sells for about 10 times less, and that seems fairly similar here as well. All right, now #4. This is a low sale. This is Fantastic Four #45 with a CGC 7.5 that sold for $900. Now, this is a book that over the last few months has been kind of on an unexpected run, kind of an increase in prices. And I think a lot of that was tied to the Eternals, that people were expecting, now that we have the Eternals, we might get another shot at the Inhumans appearing in the MCU, because this is the first appearance of the Inhumans. Now, this book really took off back in the 2014-2015 timeframe when we had that Inhumans TV show that ended up being just awful, and after that, it tanked the prices of this book. So people generally expected they weren't going to see these characters again, or not for a long time, killed the prices in this book. But it definitely has started to come back again over this last year, as we've seen the prices in comics go up, and with some speculation that we could see the Inhumans again in the MCU. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $1,200. This was 25% below that estimate. The record price was $1,500 from May 10th, back in that time frame. You always hear me talk about May and June of 2021. That's when a lot of things were peaking. But it also had a strong sale in November of $1,260. So this sale was definitely weak in comparison. This was 40% below that $1,500 sale, and like I said, 25% below my estimate of $1,200. Now, this is a pretty big Fantastic Four key regardless, and so I don't think it's ever, again, a bad book to pick up if you find it at a discount to current going prices. Now, personally, I don't know how likely it is that we're actually going to see these characters in the MCU in any type of near term, so I wouldn't necessarily be picking it up on the expectation that we're going to see some type of jump from them appearing. If they do, great, but otherwise it's just a book that I would say is just a key. If you want to have it, it's not a real big risk picking it up, but I don't know if there's something that's really going to drive it up in the near term. But it is relatively expensive. If you want a cheaper alternative, you can go one issue later in Fantastic Four #46. This is the first full appearance of Black Bolt, who is the leader of the Inhumans. And this book isn't cheap, but it's a little more affordable than issue 45. That same grade, a 7.5, goes for about $600. So you can save yourself a little bit of money and still have something invested into the Inhumans if that's your goal, or you think that they're going to eventually appear in the MCU, and that's your reason for picking up that book. If you just want this as a key, just something to collect, then go for it, pick it up. But for any type of speculation, again, I don't know how likely it is that we're actually going to have these characters in the MCU in the near term. All right, now NumberThree. This was a high sale. It took a while, but we finally got to our first Golden Age book of the list. This was Weird Chill's #1 with a CGC 1.8 that sold for a record $1,320. Now, this was an easy record to hit because it has never sold in a 1.8 before, so it set the record on its own, but this was a strong sale compared to other sales around it. Now, it's no surprise that we're having big sales with pre-code horror books. Those books have just continued to be on a very strong trend. They're really hot, and people are realizing how tough it is to find a lot of these books in any grade, because 1.8 is a very low grade. But with a book like this, it doesn't matter. There are only 46 universal copies on the census, so there are not a lot of them out there. There's not a lot of supply, and with the increased demand, you're definitely seeing jumps in the prices for a lot of these books. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at just $600. This was 120% above that estimate. Now, like I said, there are no prior sales in this grade, but based on some other sales around it, that's how I came up with that estimate, and this was a very strong sale in my opinion. The tough thing for providing alternatives for books like this is that people are buying these for the cover. It's the shot content of that cover. And so you can't necessarily just say, well, then go buy Weird Chill's #2 or something like that. It's not going to have the same cover content. But if you watch my channel, I've talked about a lot of different pre-code horror titles, covers, that kind of thing. And there's tons of options out there that are worthwhile to go and look for. And I've also talked about these Gerber photo journals. I definitely recommend picking up these. There's 2 of them. These 2 here. There's 2 of them. And one for, what is it, A through K or something like that, A through J, and the other one for K through Z. And these books have, just page after page of covers. And so it's basically every cover effectively from the Golden Age. And so you could pick up these, you can look through these and find some of those cool covers, the ones that you think are interesting, the ones that you think are fun from that time period, and start searching those out. I really do recommend that. If you are interested at all in Golden Age books, go pick up a copy of those. And you don't have to buy them brand new, you can buy them used, it's just the pictures. So I bought mine, I think, on eBay, and so just because they're not cheap, they are a little expensive, so I do recommend just picking them up used, and then you can flip through and see what types of covers are out there. All right, now #2. So this is the most surprising low sale that I saw in this auction, and this was the second book on this list that I actually picked up. Now, this is Amazing Spider-Man #2 with a CGC 2.0 restored that sold for $1,140. Now, this is the first time I've ever owned a copy of this book, and I've said in other videos that normally I won't go after Silver Age restored books. I might consider it for like an AF-15 or something like that, but generally I don't go after Silver Age restored. Golden Age, definitely, but there are no hard and fast rules in comic collecting, in buying comics. So it definitely is a case-by-case basis. And so with this one, this was a 2.0. It has a small amount of color touch. It's a C1. And I took a close look at the book, and I had a tough time finding where that color touch is. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. This one, it didn't seem very obvious to me, so it's probably a relatively small amount. C1 does mean small, but you can have some pretty big ranges with C1. And so what I considered with this book was that my plan is to send this book in, to have the color touch removed, and then have it regraded. And I expect it will likely even remain at a 2.0. And with recent sales on this book has sold in a 2.0 Universal for $2,500 in January alone. A 0.5 sold for $1,100. And so I felt very comfortable paying $1,140 for this. And then I have the cost that it's going to go into to having the color touch removed and the regrading and all of that. And it felt to me like a very good buy for this book, especially since this is a really nice looking 2.0. You've got really bright reds. Sometimes that red on the top half of the book can be a really orange color. This one has really bright reds. It actually looks nice for a 2.0, so very happy with this book. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $1,900. Basically, I backed out what I thought the cost would be to have the color touch removed and the regrading, and just some of the inconvenience, time for sending things in. This was 40% below that estimate. So I felt like this was just a steal for the third appearance of Spider-Man, first appearance of the Vulture, especially because the Vulture looks like it is a character that they are going to plan on leveraging quite a bit in the future for additional Spider-Man properties in this Sony MCU, kind of like mashup with Spider-Man. So I think this is a great book to own. Even though it's already a big key, I think that this has a lot of potential in the speculation area moving forward. Now, obviously, this book is very expensive. Like I said, a 0.5 sold for $1,100, so this is an expensive book. There is another option I've mentioned in other videos. You could go for his second appearance in Amazing Spider-Man #7, but that book has actually gone up quite a bit recently. That was one where it used to be in that range where it sold for about 1/10 of the first appearance. But now it's at a range where it's selling for about 1/5 of that first appearance. So to me, Amazing Spider-Man #2 actually seems like the better buy. And so if you can afford that book, that's the one that I personally would be going for instead of Amazing Spider-Man #7 right now. It is the more affordable option, so you could get that same grade, that 2.0, for about $400 right now. But personally, if you can get a copy of Amazing Spider-Man #2, that's the one I would go for. All right, now #1. This was the most surprising high sale that I saw in this auction. This one was a total shocker for me. This was a huge sale. This was Tales to Astonish #27 with a CGC 5.5 that sold for a record $16,800. Now, this is the first appearance of Hank Pym, who becomes Ant-Man, and with sales like this, you can tell there is definitely some hype coming into this next Ant-Man movie. I've also been seeing prices of that Avengers 8, the first appearance of Kang, start to creep up again. So you can see people are getting into those books again. Now, this is one of the bigger Silver Age Marvel keys. It's not in the top tier. I don't put it with, like X-Men 1, Fantastic Four 1, Amazing Spider-Man 1, Amazing Fantasy 15, those books, but I would put it right below that in the next tier. Now, this is one of the older ones, though. This is December of 1961. It's still a 10-cent issue, and there are very few copies of this book on the census compared to the other big Silver Age keys. Only 867 copies that are universal graded versus thousands, usually 2,000 to 3,000 to 5,000. I think X-Men's like 5,000 now or something. And so way less copies of this book available. And that 5.5, it's tough in high grade, even in mid grade. That puts it in the top 22% of all books graded. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $6,500. This was 158% above my estimate. $10,300 above that estimate. Monster sale. Now, a 5.5 hasn't sold for quite a while. The last one was in 2017, and that was for $3,550. And the prior record was all the way back in 2015 when the first Ant-Man movie came out, and that was for $4,505. But for comparison, a 6.0 sold in December for $7,850, and a 5.0 sold just this year in January for $5,700. So this is a massive sale, selling for over double that 6.0 from December, almost triple from that 5.0 sale from just in January. So huge sale. The question is, was this just a fluke sale? Some people that got overzealous in their bidding and just really bid this one up, or is this going to drive up prices in other grades because of this huge sale? We'll just have to wait and see. No idea. But my favorite alternative for this book, and actually the book that I prefer more, is Tales to Astonish #35. This is Hank Pym's second appearance. It's also his first appearance as Ant-Man in costume. I think it's a much better cover. It's not a cheap book by any stretch, that's for sure, but you've got Ant-Man in costume right on the cover. I think it's a really cool cover. I like this one, but again, not cheap. A 5.5, the same grade, is gonna probably cost you around $3,000. I sold my 6.0 last year for, I think, $4,500. So, like I said, not a cheap book, but there are a lot of Ant-Man books in this Tales to Astonish run, and they're pretty affordable. If it's not a key, it tends to be a pretty affordable run of books. So there are a lot of other options. You could just go one issue later in Tales to Astonish 36, and then you've got his third appearance, because I don't believe he appeared anywhere else between then, and that book is just $300 to $350. So third appearance, $300 to $350 for a 5.5. Second appearance, about 3,000 for a 5.5, and now that first appearance, 16,000. Now, I don't know, again, if that 16,000 number will hold or if we're gonna have some lower sales after that, but this was a very surprising sale, just a monster sale for that character. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video, saw some fun books, some surprising sales on that high and low end. Again, congratulations to Kyle Hollywood for that Superman 233. Hope you enjoy it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.